Welcome, my friends.
Welcome to the 9th year of the Ray Bradbury Storytelling Festival. We are very, very excited to have you here today. My name is Megan Wells, and I will be your mistress of ceremonies for this morning concert. We have two internationally acclaimed storytellers here for you today. We have Linda Goram and we have Shimojima, so I'm very excited to share these storytellers with you. Ray Bradbury, of course you know, grew up here in your town and wrote his books, particularly Dandelion Wine and Something Wicked This Way Comes, about your town, calling it Greentown, Illinois. How many of you have read either Dandelion Wine or Something Wicked This Way Comes? Okay, good, excellent. There are many people who will read those books twice a year. Something Wicked This Way Comes right in the season of October, and then in the spring they will read Dandelion Wine. Something wicked this way comes, by the pricking of my thumbs, is a line from Shakespeare. Ray loved the dark, and when the library approached him and said, we would like to make a collaboration with the Genesee Theatre and the library and you, he said, well, that's all real good. You just gotta do it in October. We love October, when you put your hands right there on the dark. He loved the dark because he felt that it was by that delicious darkness it woke up a little more love for the light and the life. He said, you can't be afraid of death. You have to embrace it. I'd like to start with a very short excerpt from his book, The Halloween Tree. And then we'll just play a little bit with a song and we'll bring our next storyteller on. It was a small town with a small river by a small lake in a small northern part of a Midwest state. There was not so much wilderness that you couldn't see the town, but then on the other hand, there was not so much town that you couldn't see and smell and touch and taste. Everything wild. Why, that town was full of trees and dried grass and dead flowers, because it was October now. And there were fences everywhere for boys to walk upon, and sidewalks for skating, and a large, dark ravine that you could fall in and yell across. And on this day, this time, there were boys, 8 boys. 8 boys, and it was the afternoon of Halloween, and the houses were closing up against the cool winds, and the town itself standing still, pensive, waiting in the cold sunlight. And then suddenly the day was gone, and night came out from underneath the trees and spread. In the houses behind the doors, there was a sound of scurrying feet and muffled cries. Behind Tom Skelton's door, he stood, 13 years old, and then leaned toward the front window, and he could hear the wind nestling and rustling through the dry leaves and the trees, and then coming down to prowl along the sidewalks like silent black cats. Oh, it was easy to tell that this wind was special. It was easy to know that this night was special. These nights, these Halloween nights, were cut like black velvet, like gold velvet, like orange velvet. Chimneys, thousands of chimneys, all puffing black funeral parlor smoke into the air, and the houses smelled of pumpkin, raw, cut into jack-o'-lanterns or baked into pies. And the hurrying and the scurrying behind the houses grew now to exasperation as the children, half painted in grease paint, grabbed the last sheet, looked under bed, stole from mother's closets, opened the attic, broke locks, opened up old attic chests to pillage for costumes. Tom Skelton looked at his costume, the white spine, the rib cage, the long bones, the elbows, the knee joints. I'm lucky, he thought. I've got a great name. Tom Skelton. Everybody calls me Skeleton anyway. It's easy for me on Halloween. I know what I'm going to wear. Bones. Wham! 8 front doors slammed as 8 boys leaped out of their houses, leaped over sleeping cats, over dried ferns, over plants, over jack-o'-lanterns to land in the dry grass and then gallop, rushing and galloping, feeling the wind, thinking to myself that the wind is helping, the wind is pulling and pushing, and they're grabbing at sheets and wigs that are falling with boy curses and mustaches and get the last elements pulled all together still while they're running, and now they let the wind pool into their lungs until they yell. Yelling! And then wham, they collide. They collide there at Main Street, all of them right there on the corner. A beggar, a gargoyle, a witch, masks and linen, mummified, wild-fouled inside. And they look up and the wind is picked up. Tom Skelton smiles to himself because the lantern is moving with that wind, and he thinks it's like a cathedral bell. And looking out at the streets, at the light coming and going there on the streets, it's like a great pirate ship, a drunken pirate ship here in all this light. Who's that? Who's that? Who's that? I'm a mummy. Yeah, I can see it's a mummy, but who are you? Guess. Who's that? I'm a burglar. What do you think? Well, who's that? Oh, there's no time for this. Come on. And on the dime, trick or treat, they shout, and they start running. Only they're running on everything but the sidewalks. Finally, one at a time, they're jumping over small bushes, landing on yipping, complaining dogs. And then Tom Skeleton, who's at the head of the group, just stops and turns around and says, "Wait a minute. Well, wait. Count off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, that's not right. Move over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Stop. 7. It's only 8. There's supposed to be 9. And then they're sniffing at each other like crazy beasts. Pipkin. How do they know? Pipkin. And without any discussion, without any planning, the 8 boys turn like a ship and then rush with panic to Pipkin's house. They all stand there. They look at the house. It is way under Halloweened. Not enough corn husks. There's no jack-o'-lanterns. All the windows are closed and dark. And one of them dares to say it out loud. Oh, man, what if Pipkin's sick? No, that can't be right. No, Pipkin can't be sick. There's no Halloween without Pipkin. And they all knew the truth of it. So that one plucked a little crabapple from the tree there and threw it against the front door, and it made the sound that a rabbit will make when it thumps on wood. And then they waited in that silence as all that wind, all that yelling, all that exhilaration pooled in their hearts, heavy as lead. They looked like lost boys staring at that door, waiting for Pipkin. Why? Simple. Joe Pipkin was just the greatest boy in the whole wide world. And that is the opening piece to Ray Bradbury's The Halloween Tree. How many of you know that song, Down by the Bay, where the watermelons grow? Okay, good, let's do this together. Down in the tomb, where the ghoulies glow, back to my grave, I dare not go. Let's try that. Down in the tombs, where the ghoulies glow, back to my home, I dare not go. For if I do, the vampire will say,
Did you ever see a bat wearing Batman's hat?
down in the tombs. Yeah, okay, so we got it now. Down in the tombs, where the ghoulies grow, back to my grave, I dare not go. For if I do, the vampire will say,
Did you ever see the mummy hopping like the bunny?
down in the tombs. Okay, now I'm going to come out to you and let you help. Down in the tombs, where the ghoulies grow, back to my home, I dare not go. For if I do, the vampire will say, raise your hand. Let's start here. Stand up.
Have you ever seen a bat wearing Batman's hat?
Have you ever seen a bat wearing Batman's hat? Down in the tombs. Have you ever seen a
mummy? A mummy by the bay.
A mummy there by the bay,
down by the tombs? Did you ever see a
vampire?
A vampire
Singing.
drinking from a jaguar down in the tombs? Did you ever see a
hippo?
A hippo?
Eating food.
It doesn't quite rhyme. Can you rhyme it? Did you ever see a hippo?
Playing. Kippo?
Playing the game Gippo down in the tombs. Did you ever see a
Vampire at night?
vampire at night? One more. Down in the tombs. Did you ever see a
Old man wearing slacks.
an old man wearing slacks down in the tombs? Did you ever hear Linda Goram telling stories about grave worms? Here on this stage, please welcome Linda Goram. Woo!
Hello. This place is cool. I liked it when the lights went back and forth, off and on. Did it make you feel kind of scary and creepy? So for those of you who are young, I want to be sure you know what a hearse is. A hearse is a big, long car, and when someone is in a coffin, you put the coffin in the back of the hearse and drive them off to the graveyard. Now, you might have heard a little bit of this, but I will tell you, if you see a hearse, don't you ever laugh as the hearse goes by. 'Cause you may be the next one to die. They wrap you up in a big white sheet from your head down to your feet. They put you in a big black box. They cover you up with dirt and rocks. And all goes well for about a week. Then your coffin begins to leak. Ew. And the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, in your stomach and out your mouth. Oh yeah. They eat your guts. They crunch your nose. They lick the jelly between your toes. A tiny worm with rolling eyes crawls in your belly button, rolls around a while, and out your eyes. Your stomach turns a slimy green, and pus pours out like whipping cream. You spread the pus on a piece of bread, and that's what you eat when you are dead. Now you know. Now, I have a question for you. There's two kinds of people in this audience. Some of you like bugs. Some of you don't. I don't. Some of you do. I don't know why, but you do. But you know what? There was a girl. Her name was Bonnie Shrug. Bonnie Shrug. And she did not like bugs at all. She hated bugs. She was determined to destroy all the bugs in the world, and she had weapons. Oh yeah. She had a can of bug spray. Now you all know ordinary bug spray. Oh no. This was a can of jungle-tested, radioactive bug spray. Psst. She had a fly swatter. It wasn't a small little fly swatter like you're used to seeing. No. This one was oversized. This one was extra sticky. This one was never cleaned. It was always covered in red bug blood and black bug guts. And Bonnie Shrug, who was in 7th grade, she was 12 years old. She normally wore size 7.5 shoes, but when she was hunting bugs, oh no, she had a special pair, size 9. And they were pointed in the toe, and she used those shoes to squish bugs dead. And because they were pointed, she could get those bugs even if they were trying to hide in a corner. Oh yeah. The girl had problems. Like maybe some of you, I don't know. Some of you do. Now, there's something she used to do at night. I hope none of you do this. Well, part of this you might do. You probably brush your teeth at night. Okay, you might wash your face at night. Okay, maybe under your armpits. A little bit. But you don't do what she did next. She would take her arsenal of weapons, that can of spray, jungle-tested radioactive bug spray. She would take her fly swatter, the one was oversized and extra sticky, the one that was always covered in red bug. No. You have to say it. No, blood. Yeah, that's better. And black bug guts. And she would take those shoes, those extra pointed shoes, and a flashlight. Now, her bedroom had hardwood floors. And she would walk all the way around the hardwood floors, looking on the floors, looking on the ceilings, checking the walls for bugs. And then her bed was in the middle of the room. And it had bed covers that hung all the way down to the ground. And she would get on her hands and knees, and she'd lift up the bed covers and take that flashlight and put the light underneath the bed, checking for bugs. And if she saw them, she would spray them or swat them or squish them. And only when she was sure all the bugs in her room were dead or gone, that's the only time she would crawl into bed. And she'd pull those covers all the way up to her neck. Now, you know how it is when you get in bed. You don't fall asleep right away, right? Some of you might read a little bit, or you think about stuff. Don't watch TV. That will keep you awake. You're supposed to go to calm yourself down. Well, you know what she would do? She would just lay there, covers up, listening for bugs. And only after about 10 minutes, maybe 12, her eyelids would grow heavy and she would fall asleep. Now, if you had this kind of problem, don't you think your mother would worry about you? Don't you think your father would worry about you? Don't you think your teacher would worry about you? Hey, these people might be worried about you anyway. But I'll tell you this, her teacher was wonderful. Her teacher said, I'm going to develop a unit on how bugs are good for the environment, a 5-day unit so Bonnie can learn how bugs are good. Bonnie didn't want to learn how bugs were good. Do you know that girl pretended to be sick? She lost 5 days of school. She stayed home because she did not want to learn about how bugs were good. 5 whole days she missed. Now, her mother tried to help her. Her mother hired an exterminator, and that man came every month. He sprayed the inside of the house. He sprayed the outside of the house. As a matter of fact, Bonnie thought he did a pretty good job because in her bedroom, on her walls, she had posters of the Terminex man. She was going to grow up to be a Terminex woman herself. That was her goal. Her father, he really worried. Because, you see, he had a secret. He had never told his wife, he had never told Bonnie. When her father was in 7th grade, when he was 12, he too had a bug phobia. He too had an oversized, extra sticky fly swatter. His was also covered in red bug. Oh, you said that good this time. And black bug guts. He too had a can of jungle-tested, extra-strength radioactive bug spray, and he too had pointed shoes. And he was worried. Could Bonnie be a chip off the old block? Could she be an acorn that had not fallen far from the tree? Could she be a slice of ham off the old pig? He worried. Now, Bonnie had games she liked to play. You all have games you like to play, like sports, right? Like soccer and baseball and gymnastics, hockey, tennis, golf. Wait. How about games that involve your thumbs? Wait. Does anybody still play board games? You play Monopoly? Yes. Do you play Scrabble? The game of life? I am so glad to hear that. But guess what? Bonnie Shrug did not like any of those games. She did not like any of those sports. All the games she liked, all the sports she liked had to do with bugs. And her favorite game? Yes, you're close. It's called Roach Hunting in the Basement. Have you played it? Some of you have. That's good. Okay, so here's what she would do. She would take that can of spray, jungle tested, extra strength, radioactive. Psst. She'd take that oversized, extra sticky fly swatter, the one always covered in red bug blood and black bug guts, and she would take those pointed shoes and a flashlight. And she'd go down the basement stairs by herself. And she'd sit on the bottom step. And she'd wait until everything was quiet. And then she'd turn on that flashlight. And she'd spray that light around. Ooh, on a good day, she'd see water bugs crawling across the floor. Or she'd see spiders in the corners. Or she'd see earwigs crawling up the walls. But on a really great day, she would see roaches. And she would spray them or swat them or squish them all. And then she'd march up the steps and announce to her parents that she, Bonnie Shrug, had destroyed all the bugs in the world. Well, in the basement. Oh, her parents worried about her. I'm telling you. Now, one day, it was nighttime. She brushed her teeth. She washed her face, that's right. And her armpits, not just one, both. You can't do just one. You know that, right? Okay, I'm just checking. And then she put on those shoes, got that flashlight, got that can of spray, got the fly swatter. She walked all around her room, no bugs. She pulled up the bed covers, looked underneath, no bugs. She crawled into bed, pulled those bed covers up to her neck. 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, 11 minutes. Finally, her eyelids grew heavy, and she was just about to go to sleep. Now, has it ever happened to you where you're just about to go to sleep and your body kind of like jumps? That's kind of a weird feeling, right? It messes up your whole sleep thing, right? Well, that's what happened to her. She kind of jumped and she said, ooh, something doesn't seem right. So she reached out her arm to turn on her light because there was a little table next to her bed with a lamp on it. But when she reached out to turn on her light, a giant bug crawled across her arm and landed in her armpit just as she pulled her arm in, squishing that bug, sending bug blood and bug juice dripping all down her body. She knew something was wrong. Now, she said, okay, I know what to do. My arsenal of weapons is always nearby. She took a deep breath. She reached out her arm one more time to find that can of spray. Gone. Okay. The fly swatter, it's always on that table. Okay. She reached out. Gone. What's left? Shoes, the shoes. I always keep them, she said, right beside the bed, but I have to turn on the light. Oh no. This time she reached out, turned on the light, looked over the side of her bed. Gone. But she was not prepared for what she saw. Her floor was covered with bugs. And they weren't scattered on the floor, no. They were marching in rows, like little armies, 1,000 across, 1,000 deep, all coming from all the corners of her room, all marching toward her bed. Their little feet were stomping on the floor. Their little jaws were chomping in grim anticipation. And their little antennae were waving. Bonnie She saw them all coming toward her. She sat up in her bed. She tilted back her head to scream as she had done on many nights. But when she opened up her mouth, a giant roach fell from the ceiling and lodged in her throat. She could feel its tiny legs tingling the inside of her throat. She gagged. She could not speak. She watched in horror as all of those things marched toward her bed, those insects, spiders of every kind, earwigs and snails and slugs and roaches and caterpillars, all kinds of things she could identify, things she never saw before, all coming toward her bed. She knew the bed covers went all the way to the floor. She knew they'd be getting closer. She knew what was coming next. She looked at the foot of her bed and she saw that first army of roaches coming toward her. She pulled her feet out from underneath the covers. She grabbed her arms around her knees. She watched them coming toward her. And when that first roach touched her big toe, she swallowed that roach in her throat and she screamed. Something like that. Whoa, you get the prize for my best screaming audience. Now, her father and mother, they were in the room down the hall. They had heard her scream many times. Her father said, "I've had it with this child. I'm getting rid of this bug phobia right now." He got out of his bed. He put on his slippers. He put on his robe. He walked around his bed to the door. He opened up the door. He went into the hallway. He went down the hallway to Bonnie Shrug's door. He put his hand on the door, and then he pushed it open, and he stormed inside. He was not prepared for what he saw. The floor was empty. On Bonnie's bed was a skeleton. Her body had been picked clean of skin, hair, inner organs, arteries, capillaries. All of it gone or sucked away, even toe jam and snot. And on the spot where her stomach should have been sat a large black roach. He could not breathe. He could not move. It was as if his feet were encased in cement. He stood there staring at what used to be his daughter. He did not notice something all around the edges of the room. Bugs began to gather in armies. 1,000 across, 1,000 deep. They all started marching toward that bed, their little feet, their jaws. Their antenna. He didn't notice the army of bugs that pushed the door closed behind him. He did not notice the army of bugs that crawled up that door jamb, locking it shut. He did not know that bugs have long memories. And now that they had tasted flesh, they would never settle for breadcrumbs again.
A big round of applause for Linda Goram. Oh, does she not make the best bug sounds? Our next storyteller, coming to the stage, please welcome Shimojima.
Good morning. I have some stories for you that are among my favorites. They're all stories from the United States, and the first story goes like this. Once, a long time ago, there was a man by the name of Aaron Kelly. He was mean, and he was ornery. He was so ornery that if you asked him to do something, he would do exactly the opposite just to spite you. Ooh, he was mean. Nobody liked him. So when Aaron Kelly died, there weren't too many people who were upset. Even his wife never shed a tear. She had Aaron Kelly put in his coffin, and she went home. But Aaron Kelly, he was so ornery, he would not stay in his coffin. That very first night, he climbed out of his coffin and started walking down the road towards his house. He got to his house, walked up the stairs, opened his front door, walked in, and there was his wife, now his widow, sitting in front of the fireplace, enjoying the peace and quiet. Aaron looked at her and said, "You're all dressed in black. You look like somebody died. Who died?" She said, "You did." He said, "I'm not dead. I feel fine." She said, "You don't look fine. You look dead. Now you get back in that coffin." Aaron said, "I'm not getting in any coffin. I'm not dead. I feel fine." And he walked over to the other side of the room. There was a rocking chair, and he sat down, and he started to rock in the rocking chair back and forth. Well, this was a pretty pickle. What was she going to do now? If he didn't get in the coffin, she couldn't get the insurance money. If she didn't get the insurance money, she couldn't pay for the coffin, and then they would take it away, and then what? Aaron Kelly, he didn't care about any of that. He just sat in that rocking chair and rocked day and night and day and night. And you know, his skin kind of all dried up, and his flesh fell away from his bones. And it was just Aaron's skeleton sitting in the rocking chair, rocking back and forth. I guess she just got used to it. Well, one night, she had a visitor. A man from the village. He was the finest fiddler in town. You know, he played the fiddle, the violin. And he had always kind of liked Aaron's wife, and now she was alone. He thought he'd come and call on her, get to know her a little better. So she opened the door, and there he stood with his fiddle case under his arm, and she smiled at him, and he smiled at her, and she invited him in. They sat down on the sofa together and smiled at each other, and there's Aaron's skeleton sitting in the rocking chair, rocking back and forth, and nobody said anything for a while. It was kind of awkward, and finally Aaron said, "Well, this isn't any fun. Fiddler, play us a tune. I feel like dancing." So the fiddler didn't know what else to do. He opened up his fiddle case, took out the fiddle, and began to play a slow, sweet song. Aaron said, "Nah, play something lively. I feel like dancing." So the fiddler began to play a lively tune. And Aaron's head started bopping, and his foot started tapping. And then Aaron stood up, and he started to dance. And he was swinging his arms back and forth. And all of a sudden, one of his arm bones just flew off across the room. The fiddler said, "Oh, my goodness, he's dancing so hard, he's starting to fall apart." And the widow said, "Play faster." So the fiddler was just playing as fast as he could, and Aaron, he's dancing and swinging his arm, and his other arm bone just flew across the other direction. And the widow said, "Play harder." So the fiddler's playing as hard as he could, and Aaron, he's dancing, and the bones were flying around the room, and finally, Aaron Kelly was just a pile of bones on the floor, and at the top was Aaron's skull. And the skull looked up at the fiddler and said, "Ooh, ain't we having fun?" Well, that was too much for the fiddler. He grabbed his fiddle case and his fiddle, and he ran out the door and down the road. The widow picked up all those bones and put them back in the coffin, but she was careful to mix them all up. because she didn't want Aaron Kelly putting himself back together again. But they say that if you go down to the graveyard late at night when it's real dark and you lean over Aaron Kelly's grave, you can hear noises, clickety-clack, 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 because Aaron Kelly is still trying to dance. All of these stories I'm telling you today are old stories that have come down through the years. This next story is one that I learned from a friend of mine, a storyteller from Texas named Elizabeth Ellis. It's about a boy named Jack. You probably know at least one story about Jack. Jack and the... Right, Jack and the Beanstalk. It's the same Jack, but it's not the same story. There are many stories about Jack, and this one is called Jack and the Haunted Mansion. Now, one time, Jack was living with his mama, just the two of them. They got along real well together, but they were so poor. And every day, Jack's mama worried about how she was going to find enough food to feed two people, and finally, one day, she realized she couldn't do it. So she went to her cupboard, opened it up, took down all the food there was in the house, and there wasn't much. She divided it into two parts, took one part, put it in a sack, gave it to Jack. She said, Jack, I'm sorry. I can't feed you anymore, but you're practically grown up now, Jack. It's time for you to go out into the world to seek your fortune. She felt bad to tell him that, but she knew it was the best thing. And Jack said, if anything good ever happens to me, I'll come back and I'll share it with you. And he took that sack of food and he put it over his shoulder and he started walking down the road. He was excited. It was like going off on an adventure. He'd never been out in the world before. And he walked along that first day and the second day. The third day, the sack was empty. And the fourth day, so was Jack. And the weather changed, it got real cold, and the wind started to blow, and then it started to rain. The rain was running down his shirt, down his pants, sloshing in his shoe. Jack was miserable. Well, he came to a village, and he walked through the village, and he came to an inn, like a little hotel. And he thought, I could go to that inn, and I could get myself food to eat and a place to sleep. But I don't have any money. But he went to the front door anyway and knocked on it, and the innkeeper opened it and said, who are you? What do you want? And Jack said, well, my name is Jack, and I need a place to stay. I'm a good worker. I could do any chore. I could chop wood, fetch water. I could do anything you need. Maybe you could give me a little bite to eat and let me sleep on the floor in front of your fireplace. And the innkeeper said, I haven't seen you around here before. And Jack said, I don't live around here. If I lived around here, I'd go home. And the innkeeper said, I guess that makes sense. What are you doing out in the road all by yourself? And Jack said, well, I'm out in the world to seek my fortune. The innkeeper said, oh, if it's the fortune you want, you don't want to be standing here talking to me. You look over there. You see the big hill, the one with the mansion at the top of it? Jack said, yeah, I see it. The innkeeper said, well, the king has made a decree. Any person that can spend all night alone in that mansion can have it, and all the land around it for his own. Great, said Jack. What's the catch? Well, said the innkeeper, if you ask folks around here, they tell you that mansion is haunted. Jack said, well, I've never seen anything I'm afraid of. The innkeeper said, good, I hope you can say that in the morning. And then he looked at Jack. He was standing there so thin and hungry in the doorway. He felt sorry for Jack, thought he'd give him some food. So he got a little bucket, no lid or anything, and he scooped some beans into it, and then he cut a hunk of cornbread and split it and put a big pat of butter in there and put the cornbread on the beans and handed the whole thing out the door to Jack. Jack was so glad to see that food because, he was hungry. And he took that bucket in both his hands and he started walking up the road towards that mansion. It was slow going. The rain had made the road so slick and slippery, and he He got all the way to the top without spilling his beans, and he was so proud, he went right up to the door and knocked on it. "What am I doing?" said Jack. "Who's going to answer the door if nobody lives here?" And he put his hand on the doorknob, and it was just as cold as ice. Jack said, "I'm not going to let that bother me." He put his hand on the door, and it was just as cold as the doorknob had been. But Jack, he was a brave boy, and he plucked up his courage, and he put his hand back on the doorknob, and he turned it, and he pushed that door open. And he looked, and it was hard to see because it was dark in there, but he could see a room, and there wasn't much in it, a table, a couple of chairs, but on the far wall, he could see a fireplace that was so huge, it seemed to take up the whole wall. So Jack walked in, shut the door, put the bucket of beans by the fireplace. There was a big pile of wood. He built up a big roaring fire, put the beans close so that the beans would get warm. And he was standing there rubbing his hands over the fire. He was trying to get himself warm. You know, he was just chilled to the bone from that wind and that rain. And he heard a voice coming from up in the chimney. The voice said, "I'm a-gonna fall. I'm a-gonna fall." "Come on if you're coming," said Jack, and plop. There in the fireplace there landed a pair of human legs. The legs stood up. They walked out of the fireplace, sort of shook the ashes off themselves. They walked across the room. There was a rocking chair. The legs sat down, and the chair began to rock back and forth, back and forth. And Jack said, "Good thing you didn't hit my beans." He picked up the bucket of beans and stirred those beans. Ooh, they were starting to smell good. He was so hungry. He heard that voice for a second time from the chimney. It said, "I'm a-gonna fall. I'm a-gonna fall." "Come on, I'm ready for you," said Jack, and plop. There in the fireplace there landed a human trunk, a body. It rolled out of the fireplace, sort of shook the ashes off itself. It rolled across the floor. It attached itself to those two legs, and that chair was just rocking back and forth, back and forth. And Jack said, "Stay away from my beans." He stirred those beans. Ooh, they were just about ready. He lifted the spoon. He heard that voice for a third time. It said, "I'm a-gonna fall. Can't you say anything else?" said Jack. Plop, plop. There in the fireplace there landed a pair of human arms. They hooked themselves together just like this. They walked out of the fireplace, sort of shook the ashes off themselves. They walked across the room. They attached themselves to that body, and that chair was just rocking back and forth, back and forth. And Jack said, "These are my beans." But you know, he was starting to get a little bit nervous. Just then, the body jumped up so fast that chair tipped over backwards. That body started running around the room, opening doors and slamming them shut, opening cabinets and slamming them shut. Jack said, "What are you looking for?" "My head." "Well," said Jack, "where was it the last time you saw it?" "In the cellar." "Well," said Jack, "if it'll make you sit down and be quiet, I'll go down to the cellar and I'll get it for you." And he walked over to the cellar door, opened it up, and it was cold and dark down there. Jack said, "I'll get it for you first thing in the morning." But that body leaned over, and it took its little finger right off and stuck it in the fireplace and lit it just like a candle, and he handed it to Jack. And Jack, he swallowed hard, and he took that finger, and he walked down the cellar stairs all the way to the bottom. And when he got to the foot of the stairs, he found a human head. And he picked it up, and he walked back up the stairs. The body was standing at the top waiting for him, and Jack handed up the head, and the body reached down and took the head and put it on his shoulders. "Here," said Jack. "Well, Jack," said the body, "I've been looking for my head for 7 years, and you're the first person who's ever tried to help me. You go back down those stairs and you dig right at the foot of the stairs, right where you found my head, and you'll uncover all the gold and jewels I buried there when I lived in this house when I was alive. It's enough to keep you in glory for the rest of your days. And the body was gone. Thank you, said Jack. I'll do that first thing in the morning. Well, the next morning when it was bright and sunny, Jack took a shovel and he went down those stairs. He got to the bottom and he started to dig. He dug and he dug. He uncovered such a pile of gold and jewels, it was enough to make him a rich man for the rest of his days. And the first thing he did was go home and get his mama to come and live with him in that mansion. Ever since then, they've been getting along real well together. And that's the story. Now, the next story is also a story about Jack. And I learned it from a friend of mine named Andy Leslie, who lives in North Carolina. And when he first told this story to me, he said, this story is called Jack and the Hairy Toe. And I thought he said toad, like that frog kind of animal. But he said, Jack and the Hairy Toe, you know that thing at the end of your foot? Yeah. Jack and the Hairy Toe. Now, Jack was living with his mama, and I know that at the end of the last story I said that they were rich. But somehow, at the beginning of every Jack story, they're poor. They were so poor that finally one day Jack's mama said, I cannot feed 2 people anymore. She said, Jack, I'm going to send you to live with your aunt and uncle just for a little while until things get better, not forever. Now, Jack's aunt and uncle lived on a bean farm. They grew beans and they sold beans. And 3 times a day they ate beans. Well, for breakfast, they might have a bowl of beans with milk and sugar. For lunch, bean soup. For dinner, bean stew. Maybe a bean casserole. On special occasions, bean ice cream. Now, Jack liked beans, but you eat anything 3 times a day and you get pretty sick of it, and Jack was not happy. And they also gave Jack a job. Every day he had to go to the bean field and hoe the weeds in the bean field. And one day Jack was there with his hoe, and he was in a bad mood because of all these beans he was eating all the time. And he was going like this with his hoe. He was going, beans, beans, beans. I am so sick of beans, beans, beans. Just like that. Beans, beans, beans. I am so sick of beans, beans, but. And all of a sudden, his hoe hit something, and something scurried away through the plants. Something big and black and furry, and Jack couldn't see what it was. He couldn't see where it had gone. It disappeared. Well, he shrugged his shoulders, picked up his hoe, and he saw something on the ground. So he bent, and he picked it up, and he turned it over in his fingers. It was the biggest, blackest, hairiest, ugliest toe he'd ever seen. But you know, the more he looked at it, the less it looked like a toe, and the more it looked like meat. You know, Jack hadn't had meat in a long time, and that toe started to look pretty good to him. So he took that toe and he slipped it in his pocket. And then he went home. Well, that night Jack went into the kitchen and his aunt was stirring a big pot of something, and Jack said, "What's for supper?" And she said, "Beans, Jack, beans." But then she turned and went to the other side of the kitchen. She had her back to him, and Jack went real close to that pot of bean stew, and when she wasn't looking, he reached in his pocket and he took out the toe, and real quick, he just dropped it in the pot of bean stew. That night, Jack ate every bit of his bean stew, and he asked for seconds. He had never done that before. His aunt was real pleased. She took the bowl and she went over to that pot and she got her ladle and she scooped up 2 big ladles full of that bean stew and she put the bowl in front of Jack. And Jack picked up his spoon and he stirred, and there was the toe. So he put down his spoon, he picked up his knife and his fork, and he ate it all up. And it was good. Well, after supper, Jack and his aunt and uncle were sitting in the living room, and it was getting real dark. You know, this was in the days before electricity. It was getting real dark. It was getting darker and darker, and the wind started howling around the walls of the house. It sounded like this. I want my Harry toe. And Jack's aunt said, oh my goodness, it's late, I'm gonna go to bed. She was feeling real on edge. She was feeling nervous, and so she got up and she walked up the stairs and she went into the bedroom and she jumped in the bed and she pulled the covers up to her chin and she was just lying there shaking. Well, that left Jack and his uncle in that dark room, and it was getting darker and darker and darker, and the wind started really howling around the sides of the house. It sounded like this. I want my Harry toe. And Jack's uncle said, oh my goodness, I'm going to go to bed too. And he got up and he went up the stairs, and he didn't get in the bed, he jumped under the bed, and he was lying there shaking. Well, that left Jack all by himself in that dark room. And it was getting darker and darker, and the wind was howling around the walls of the house. It sounded like this. I want my Harry toe. And Jack, he was scared. He wanted to go upstairs to bed, but he was too scared to walk up those dark stairs all by himself, and he didn't know what to do it. He heard a sound coming down the chimney. Scratch, 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 scratch. And Jack looked at the fireplace, and through the evening shadows, he could see something big and black and furry. And Jack stared at that thing in the fireplace. He said, who are you? What have you come for? And that thing in the fireplace? Now, oddly enough, that's the last line of the story. We don't know what happened to Jack, but I think he's fine because he comes back for many more stories. And that one was Jack and the Hairy Toe.
Thank you. A hand for Ann Shimojima. For Linda Goram. And Mr. Soundman, we're going to have Linda Goram just sing one verse of a closing song for us.
I would like to suggest that you don't eat candy tonight. It does not have any protein. So instead of candy, if you would take my suggestion, and I'm sure Megan and Ann would agree, you should eat something very good for you, like 6 round plates of soft, squishy zebra snot. Yes, yes, all mixed up with oyster eyes. Yes, yes, it's good. Served on top of dog poo pies. Yes, 6 round plates of soft, squishy zebra snot. And I will also suggest that you should use a spoon.
Thank you. We will see Many of you, please come back tonight for our 6:30 concert for families, and then our 8 o'clock concert for the older ones. The 8 o'clock concert is when we do the serious, scary stories. Thank you.